We can hear you, Karen.
Great. Well, thank you very much. The only thing worse than giving a presentation at a meeting that has been historically and inherently very interactive to 183 participants is to give that presentation after Lynn Garcia. So thank you, Lynn. It was a really terrific talk, and I don't think this one's going to be quite as exciting, but I hope it will be in line with some of the things that Lynn was saying. So I don't, Stacy, does everybody see the pictures here on the right? Is there a way I should reduce that in some way, or can
We
you?
can see your slides.
Just fine.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So let's see here. There we are. Okay. So in latent print analysis, I think I have roughly 20 minutes to discuss this. And Stacy, if you'd be so kind as to monitor the chats, because I'm not going to be paying attention to those.
Sure.
The areas that we're involved with here involve evidence assessment, primarily through the use of quality metrics, proficiency testing and quality assurance, and case processing. And the emphasis here is consistent with the emphasis that I hope you've been hearing about all day and throughout its 5 years and into the next 5 years, is a coordination across team projects. The focus on studies that are genuinely applied, and particularly demonstrable impact and transferability, what we sometimes they call in the medical field bench to bedside, from research to actual practice. So I'm going to review, let's see, I guess 7 projects in the space of 4 slides. So it will be a little bit 30,000 foot, and I won't go through all of the details on these slides because they will be posted. I think Stacy and Harley plan to post them. But one of the projects in this area concerns the use of quality metrics, sometimes they call it information content, for latent fingerprints. And we certainly hope the projects that you're going to hear about in this section will transfer to other forms of pattern evidence. And Charles alluded to that when he was talking about quality metrics for shoe prints. So the goal here is to calibrate values of quality metrics to some sort of assessment of accuracy in latent print examinations. And probably the easiest way for me to describe this is to refer you to the SWGFAST sufficiency chart. And when I first saw this, I was from Cedric Newman, I was very excited because I thought this was exactly what we wanted to do, but to make it, as Lynn indicated, something a little more quantitative rather than based on subjective assessment. So on the x-axis, you see there was the number of minutia, and the y-axis was some impression about their quality, and then they have sort of 3 broad regions. And it occurred to me that it would be really nice if in each one of those boxes there, you could actually have some sort of assessment as to prints that had roughly that number of minutia and roughly some quantitative level of quality that you could put in that box. What proportion of the latent print examiners were able to make a proper assessment, a correct assessment about it? We don't care who those latent print examiners are, what labs they come from, or whatever, but just some sort of a number, plus or minus some uncertainty, so that there's some indication about its usefulness, particularly for crime lab managers. If something is really low, then the crime lab manager may not want to invest resources in analyzing it because it may not end up turning out to be very useful. So in CSAFE 1.1, we developed a UVA team with some assistance. Elsewhere, a quality metric algorithm that returns several features. We also research available algorithms that could be used. Unfortunately, most of those are not, we don't have the code for them, but we did have another one that had the code that we looked into, its feasibility. And we also had two others, one from Nobilis that Robert's predecessor, Subalu, enabled us to use. Again, that's just executable code. And then also a form of that was used in FRStat. I think Jeff Salyards is on this call. He was the Defense Forensic Science Center director when FRStat was developed. And we initiate some tests on some latent prints through Houston's Forensic Science Center Quality Assurance Program, and I'll be talking more about that later. So in terms of impact, we demonstrated the feasibility of calculating these metrics, illustrated that it could be done in a forensic lab as kind of a prototype for other labs, and introduced the objectives and value of quantitative quality metrics to forensic lab personnel. Second project involves proficiency testing. And there's sort of several aspects, in fact, three separate projects from the first 5 years that involved proficiency testing. But the goal was really to, of these projects was roughly to better understand the commercially available latent print proficiency tests in terms of their level of difficulty and examiners' perceptions. So I remember one latent print examiner telling me that it was his perception that the prints on there tended not to be very difficult, and we wanted to see if, in fact, that was a general consideration. And also, importantly, be able to facilitate or at least try to understand what were some of the barriers towards implementing blind proficiency testing. So some real significant accomplishments here with quite impressively, the team that has been working on this, and I'm sorry I should have mentioned this earlier, these proficiency, this section involves several people, but notably Robin Mejia, Brett Gardner, and Sharon Kelly, along with Dan Murray. They managed to get such good cooperation with Collaborative Test Services, primary provider of those proficiency tests, to let them add survey questions to their proficiency tests, which I thought was pretty impressive. They've also provided several webinars about how to have a blind QC program. And then what was really, I think, quite a landmark and exciting time was a 2-day meeting at the Allegheny County Office of Medical Examiners that CMU arranged. This has been followed by a report that will be posted and forthcoming as well as a webinar. But that meeting, 2-day meeting, got 8 quality managers, labs to send their quality managers, 4 lab directors, chief medical examiner, and director of education from 7 labs to attend. There was quite a bit of enthusiasm for pursuing this. That's probably going to be on hold, but it was extremely effective, I thought. There have been several forensic science publications. Several of them have been co-authored with Peter Stout's QA people. I'm going to talk more about the research quality associate at HFSC on the next slide, and really developed a strong collaboration between lab managers and QA professionals. I think that's one of the first things that Alicia mentioned in her opening remarks this morning, is that we've really been very fortunate to have some very strong and cooperative collaborations. And the third aspect that I'll cover that involves 2 more CSAFE projects involves what was previously called human factors, but it has to do with processing, actual case processing. So the goals were to establish collaboration with a crime lab, and we fully appreciate that this is easier said than done. Crime labs are busy. They've got an awful lot of cases coming through, and a primary goal here is to try to ensure that we're not interrupting their process, while at the same time trying to collect information that will hopefully be of use to them. Document the latent print workflow to identify areas for potential improvement. This was, kind of following along the lines of what You might have seen Hal Stern was involved in a human factors report many years ago, not long after the 2009 NAS report came out, which had a flow chart. And it's that kind of thing within a lab to be able to document that workflow and see if there are areas for potential improvement, and then explore task relevance and knowledge of error rates within the labs. So some major accomplishments there have been publications, presentations, and webinars. And also, as I mentioned on the previous slide, that Madison Newman at, I think she's on the call today too, is at Houston Forensic Science Center. She's been extremely helpful with data collection and the testing some of the preparation of cases for blind quality control. We fully appreciate that this is possible only at HFSC right now, which has a very large QA department, but we are hoping that some version of this can be implemented in labs that are less, have fewer resources than HFSC does. But it does show that the value of a strong and productive collaboration between the crime lab quality managers and the academic researchers. So as on the previous slide, there have been several publications, and I think those you can see listed on the CSAFE website. So I'll just give just a real brief example of how this collaboration with laboratories has ended up being useful, in that one of them went to a researcher at Carnegie Mellon and said, we got this problem. We're trying to figure out how we can improve the analysis of latent prints on seized drug bags. So the working together, they better understood the former standard operating procedure, conducted a couple of studies, and the impact was to change the Allegheny County Office of Medical Examiner standard operating procedure so that it was both more effective and safer for personnel. So in terms of the research area objectives for 2.0, again, fingerprints are a useful form for conducting some of these studies because they are so prevalent. They remain extremely valuable as probative evidence, and they're key for many legal decisions. Nonetheless, of course, issues remain. Their real-world accuracy outside of a study, and what's the probability of a coincidental match. I think latent print examiners all agree that the accuracy of conclusions and assessments depend heavily on the number of features and their quality. So we need empirical evidence to quantify that relationship. So the goals are to better understand the relationship between the output that comes from these quality metric algorithms. Can we combine that output in some way to come up with a good vector of measures related to image quality and the accuracy of assessments in real-world case processing? Again, a lot easier said than done. Studies of proficiency testing and the effects of implementing blind proficiency testing on process, and studies of forensic processing in crime labs. So the people involved in this are the first one that I mentioned about quality metrics, actually trying to complete that graph that I showed earlier, using some analysis, some data, statistical analysis known as item response theory to improve proficiency testing. Blind proficiency testing the previous one was Amanda Luby at Swarthmore. She was involved in CSAFE as a graduate student, is now professor at Swarthmore. Blind proficiency testing, Robin Mejia and Sharon Kelly. Forensic processing at crime labs, Brett Gardner and Robin Mejia. And then trying to understand the some of the failures of statistics and forensic contributions in exonerations. So I think I've indicated what was the goal of the quality metric study. So we've demonstrated that this can be done in a lab, but where we really need a lot of help, and I'll return to this on my last slide, is in soliciting crime lab participation. We would like to be able to, would like to create a set of test latent prints for blind latent print examiners. So I'm working with someone at, in the Criminal Justice Department at Cal State University, Keith Inman, and he has this endless supply of students who can supply prints for us. Those cannot be actually put into any kind of a database, but they could be used for these test purposes because the correct answer would be, they can't find a match. But actually implementing these things in practice without interfering too greatly with process going on at these labs is not a trivial concern, and we realize it's likely to take some time. But we also can seriously appreciate that the point here is to evaluate the entire process from start to finish once you actually have the print on the card, and then sending it all the way through, not simply doing just a small part or small parts of the process. We do hope that then once we have enough information, we can use machine learning algorithms to extract a subset of the results from these quality metric algorithms to develop estimates of assessment accuracy. And also, hopefully translate some of what we're learning to other forms of pattern evidence. And the potential impact, as I indicated, was to enable lab directors to prioritize workflow, provide estimates of accuracy, and transfer the knowledge to other forms of evidence. For blind proficiency testing, we hope to expand the use of blind proficiency testing to facilitate both within labs and between lab studies, and establish a consortium of labs that can provide mutual support for blind proficiency testing in terms of shared standard operating procedures, best practices, and possibly materials. The proposed activities, immediate proposed activities, is to continue working with the HFSE and the Allegheny County Office of Medical Examiners to increase the use of blind testing and analyze the results so that we have some demonstrable successes that we can describe to other labs. Is I indicated there, and the goal is to create this consortium of labs to help facilitate the implementation of blind proficiency testing in a way that's not going to interrupt the process, but also with some published protocols, shared materials. And analyzing the results and assessing the impact of blind testing on existing QA programs, and extend the collaboration with collaborative testing services. So the potential impact will be to test the entire case pipeline so that labs can help to identify process improvements. And this consortium, we think, will probably be beneficial for the forensic science community. Once we have the data, what do we do with it? And this is where Amanda's project is going to be useful. This kind of thing, item response theory, is often done in education tests, like the SAT or the ACT. What questions are kind of connected to this aspect of versus another aspect, and which of those aspects of a proficiency test will be useful for identifying areas of difficulty versus areas that are easily understood. So the potential impact here is to better understand the cognitive processes involved in latent print analysis, and to demonstrate the validity and improve the consistency of annual proficiency exams. And then finally, there's case processing at crime labs. So this was a combination of some previous studies I'm pooling together on this one slide, which is to study the workflow differences across labs and look at the effects of process changes and exposure to contextual information. So some of the proposed activities are to look at 3 different labs with contrasting policies and examine some of their factors and their case processing variables, see what works, what is particularly effective. Evaluate the effects of implementing changes in lab case flow where possible, and especially being able to quantify the financial and operational costs of those procedural changes. We'll be conducting some experiments on these things, and the potential impact we hope will be to strengthen the process in various ways, either make it more effective or more accurate. So finally is another project that Simon Cole is working on, and that is to look at some previous cases to understand the contribution of forensic science, particularly with respect to statistics that led to both proper and wrongful convictions. So some of the proposed activities will be to be looking at this National Registry of Exonerations and reconcile the coding that's used between the NRE and the Innocence Project, and to be studying the role of different disciplines that were involved in this NRE. So the potential impact will, I think, be to implement a new and improved coding scheme for forensics in ways that are related to the data rather than maybe what has been used for some of the traditional categories. So I'm going to end with this slide, which is resources and needs. I've identified 4 areas that some of the CSAFE team members have thought where we could really use some help. One of them is more labs to participate in this quality metrics study. Is there a way of doing that without interfering too much with the process? Houston has been extremely generous and agreeable, but we do want the results to apply to way beyond Houston Forensic Science Center. And unfortunately, as a statistician, we're always taught before you go in and try to design a study, you should always go in and look at the layout, get the lay of the land. And with this current distancing, it's a little hard to do that. So, but I've often found it's very helpful to actually go into the lab and see what they're doing and see if there's a way to help facilitate that. Some of that may need to wait, though. We need more anonymized results for collaborative testing services so that we can do robust data analysis. QA managers, a question for you. Do you have anonymized proficiency testing data that you'd be willing to share? And for forensic practitioners and professionals, how can we solicit your input? That says you input, it's supposed to say your input for this research. And I think at that, I'll stop, Stacy, and maybe you can start reading off some of the questions. And I hope that there will be several suggestions for more ideas that the community can engage with these projects. Is there something I'm supposed to do? Stop sharing?
I see. Hi, Karen. This is Stacy. I see that there is a question in the Q&A.
Okay. So let me go here.
If we could, Robin, you are here as a facilitator as well. Maybe the question is most appropriate for Robin or Sharon, Kelly, or Dan Murray, Brett Gardner. It's about blind proficiency testing.
Right, so this question asks about if the goal is to assess the entire process, start to finish, of latent print examinations with blind proficiency testing. It raises the issue of uploading prints into, if it's NGI systems. And so actually, I did check, we do have Maddie Newman on the call too, who, if we could elevate in case she wants to chime in. Where this has been done successfully, the prints are actually uploaded into the system. So we have, I believe it's available on our website, we have a white paper out of the blinding meeting that identified a lot of the core challenges, and we have an academic paper in process, and identifying who needs, particularly for latent prints and for DNA evidence, ensuring that the known prints don't end up in national systems when they shouldn't is a core issue. And a key issue is defining how many people need to know what's a test, what's not, to ensure that things don't get released down the levels that they should. And often it may be QA staff or lab staff exemplars that end up getting used. So this is a key logistical challenge, specific, and this is why latent prints is not one of the easiest disciplines to implement this kind of thing in. I don't know, like I said, we have a chat function. Maddie, Sharon, Brett, did I represent that reasonably well?
Yeah. Robin,
Yeah.
thank you. That was beautiful.
Hi, this is Maddie. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to clarify that the way that we submit the latent print cards at the Houston Forensic Science Center, the current process in the section right now is to only upload to the local database nonviolent crimes. So when we create a test case, we use a nonviolent crime. They only get uploaded to the local database, and then we can go in later and remove those prints from the database. So we don't go into the FBI databases at all. We have aliases in the local database and not in the FBI database, probably for obvious reasons. So let me know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Maddie and Robin, for chiming in. Do we have any other attendee questions? You're welcome to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Alternatively, you can raise your hand and we can allow you to unmute to chime into the discussion.
I always worry as a presenter when nobody asks any questions. Thank you, Lynn. She has just said that she'll help connect with other Texas labs about participating. That would be wonderful because there's clearly an enormous range of sizes of labs in Texas. So that I think could be extremely valuable. Thank you very much.
And with that, Karen, thank you for your presentation and for representing the work of the latent print analysis group for CSAFE. And I think we will move on to Porrick Smith, Dr. Porrick Smith from University of California, Irvine, to share with us information from the digital evidence group at CSAFE. And just as an update for everyone, we continue to be around 200 participants in today's CSAFE all hands meeting. So thank you for sticking with us throughout the day and learning more about CSAFE 2.0.